Hey guys, this lovely manhwa is titled Becoming a Family with the Duke and His Dear Son. Enjoy. In Adelhart Estate, Belia Barnian sat across from Duke Cassis, smiling to herself. He's looking at me like I'm his worst enemy, she thought. Well, he's not entirely wrong. Cassis glared at her, his voice sharp. What brought you here without prior notice? She nervously squeezed the fabric of her dress, trying to steady herself. Your Grace, I wish to call off our engagement, she said firmly, without a hint of hesitation. The Duke leaned back in his chair, eyeing her carefully. Do you realize what you're saying? Belia nodded. We both know we don't want this contractual marriage. It all began a week ago, when she was struck by the trunk of reincarnation. She collapsed to the ground, and the last thing she heard before slipping into darkness was, somebody call 911. To her surprise, she didn't die. When she opened her eyes, she was in a completely different world. She leapt from the bed and rushed to the mirror, her reflection making her scream. She wasn't herself anymore. She was inside a fantasy novel, reborn as none other than Ibelia Barnian. According to the novel, Ibelia would eventually marry Duke Cassis and become the stepmother of Lucius. She wasn't a loving or kind woman, no, she was the worst kind of stepmother, cruel, jealous, and bitter. Ibelia had also been born out of wedlock, just like Lucius, but unlike her, he was adored in the dukedom. That drove Ibelia mad with envy. She couldn't stand the boy's happiness and tried to ruin him, until her evil deeds were revealed. Stripped of her title and thrown to the streets, she grew ill and died miserably. Readers of the novel had cheered at her downfall. Soyeon Han had been one of those readers. I wasn't the only one who left a comment, so why am I the one in her body? She panicked. While climbing the stairs in her new life, she thought, at least Ibelia hasn't married Cassis yet. It's easier to break off an engagement than get a divorce. She was determined to be kind to Lucius, but Cassis? He despised her. She had no intention of marrying someone who looked at her with such contempt. I don't need his riches. My life would be a living hell. Before opening the door to speak with Cassis, she reminded herself, I'll break up with him and create a life far from the novel's storyline. The Duke, on hearing her say she wanted to call off the engagement, asked coldly, Is this truly your own wish, or an order from Count Barnian, your father? She met his gaze. It's my own wish. My father isn't even aware yet. Cassis stood abruptly. Then we're done talking, he said flatly. Assume this conversation never happened. She quickly reached out to stop him, grabbing his hand by mistake. He pulled away instantly, his expression turning even colder. That hurt more than she expected. I know why you agreed to this engagement, she said softly. It's because my father proposed marriage in exchange for his silence. So technically, it was a threat, she mumbled. He narrowed his eyes. So you're aware, and yet you want to break it off? I can give you the information you want, she offered, desperate, in exchange for breaking off the engagement. Cassis's voice was low. How did that information fall into your hands? Belia frowned. I'm afraid I can't tell you that. How am I supposed to explain I read it in a novel? But I promise you, the information wasn't leaked. Only my father and I know the truth. She stepped back, then asked, So, what do you say? He stared at her in silence, then unexpectedly sighed. I've heard what you said. I'll think about it. You may leave now. As she walked out alone, she huffed inwardly. Still, it's rude of him not to see me out. Just then, a small voice called, Lady Barnian? She turned to see a young boy, Lucius, gazing up at her. Would you join me for some cookies? He asked shyly. So this is Lucius, she thought, observing his features. The maid behind him gently reminded the boy, Young master, you haven't introduced yourself yet. Lucius looked flustered. Yes, greetings. Belia chuckled warmly. Greetings, young Master Adelhart. He blinked in surprise. No one's ever addressed me like that before, he mumbled. She's different, he thought. You know who I am? He asked. Of course I do. You're the spitting image of your father. She gave him a soft smile. I'm Ibelia Barnian. At your service. And, about the tea, he asked hopefully. Belia hesitated. If I accept, he might start hoping I'll be his future stepmother, and I can't let that happen. She forced a gentle refusal. I'm so sorry, young master. I have a prior engagement, so I can't today. Lucius looked down. I understand. I'm sorry for asking. She bit her lip. No, I should be the one to apologize, for turning you down. He remained there, looking heartbroken, as she walked away. Lucius Adelhart. The illegitimate child of Duke Cassius in the novel, was just as cold-blooded as his father. He didn't blink an eye when destroying his enemies. But as a child, Lucius was all alone in the midst of a terrible storm, emotionally and literally. The Duke had once pronounced Lucius as his heir in the presence of his subordinates. Many of them had questioned the decision. You should get married and have your own heir, one protested. Why choose an illegitimate child as successor? Another muttered, we all know your fondness for the young master, but that may change when you see your own flesh and blood. Silence. Cassius thundered, silencing the room in an instant. I have made my choice. And if anyone dares to oppose me, I'll have their heads. He adjourned the meeting and left the room abruptly. As he stepped out, he caught sight of Lucius running away, hiding around the corner. Lucius was eavesdropping on some noblewomen dining over tea. His mother's a commoner, or something even worse, one said, and another agreed, true. If that weren't the case, the Duke would have brought her in alongside the boy. They chuckled. Taking only the boy in? That woman must be from the slums. What a disgrace to the household. Another chimed in, if I become his stepmother, I'll send the boy off to a boarding academy. I'd send him to a monastery, another added. Lucius, overhearing this cruelty, felt his heart shrink. That night, as always, he made his wish to the moon. Please, find me a mother. Not a stepmother, a real one. Back at Count Barnian's estate, Belia walked in and announced her return, passing a few silent servants. I hope Lucius didn't cry, maybe I should have just accepted his offer. It was just tea and cookies, after all, she thought with guilt. But I only would have done that if I'd been reincarnated as someone else. She shook off the feeling. Why am I thinking about this? My main goal is to break off the engagement and live my life freely. As she entered the main hall, a young man with blonde hair stood blocking her path. Where have you been? He demanded. She glanced at him and muttered under her breath, why is he even home? I'm too tired to deal with his tantrums. I asked you a question, said Derek Barnian, her younger half-brother. Belia sighed. Did he really come all this way just to bully me? This guy had made the original Ibelia a victim too. Ibelia's mother had been a maid. Count Barnian, enamored by her beauty, slept with her, leading to Ibelia's birth. Fearing for her daughter's life, the maid fled the estate. But she soon fell ill. Desperate to save her daughter, she wrote a letter to the Count. But upon reading it, Count Barnian didn't send help, he sent an assassin to kill them. But when he saw them with his own eyes, he was captivated by the little girl's beauty. She's just like her mother, he thought. If I keep her, I can marry her off for a good sum. So he gave the child a cruel ultimatum, come with him, and he'd arrange for a physician to treat her mother, or stay behind and let her die. Ibelia had no real choice. She went with him, feeling like a sinner. Derek, the Count's second son, was furious. From then on, he took out all his frustration on Ibelia. Now, standing before her, he grabbed her wrist. Have you lost your mind, ignoring me like that? She gritted her teeth. Let go of me. You have nothing worthwhile to say. How dare you speak to me in that tone, he snapped. I'm your elder sister. Show some respect. He laughed mockingly. Don't let your engagement with the Duke get to your head. Just because you're engaged doesn't mean anything has changed. But Belia met his smugness with calm defiance. Things are different now. If I marry the Duke, I'll become one of the 3 duchesses in the entire empire. And you, an untitled noble, will have no choice but to grovel before me. His expression twisted with rage. In a fit of fury, he shoved her. She lost her balance, and tumbled down the staircase. Ibelia woke up the next morning feeling different kinds of pain. She wondered why it hurt. The maid showed up and asked where she felt the pain. Why does my body feel a bit sore? She asked Annie. Her personal maid replied, that's because the young master pushed you down the stairs. She greeted the maid while cursing at him in her mind. Annie handed her some painkillers the physician had recommended and told her to get some rest. I almost forgot, I have a letter from the Adelhart estate for you, Annie said, showing her the envelope. Ibelia was surprised she had received a letter from that estate. It was from Lucius, greeting her and saying his tutor had explained that he was supposed to officially invite her as a noble. He told her he was writing to send a formal invitation for her to enjoy delicious tea and pastries with him. After reading the letter, tears began to fall from her eyes. She wondered why she was suddenly crying, but then she remembered, she was just like Lucius. She had always wished for a stepmother and a complete family. She longed to be happy like other kids. But when she finally got a stepmother, it wasn't as she had imagined. Her stepmother wanted her gone. So she knew the pain of being rejected, and she didn't want Lucius to feel the same after getting his hopes up. Ibelia wrote a reply and gave it to Annie, asking her to find someone who could deliver it to the Adelhart estate. She then relaxed on a chair, sighing heavily and wondering what to do about Derek, who kept mocking her. Should I get revenge on Derek before I break off my engagement with Cassis? She wondered. She thought that if she broke off the engagement, Count Barnian would just try to find another suitable husband for her. So she really needed a way to escape from the house, and to do that, she had to start saving money. She picked up her coat and headed out to gather information from the guild. Meanwhile, at the Barnine estate, Lucius received her reply and was so excited that he ran to show his nanny. She asked if he wanted her to read it to him, but he declined, saying he could manage. On reading the letter, his excitement dropped. It was a polite rejection of his invitation, and he felt sad. He turned to his nanny and asked, is Lady Barnian declining because she despises me for being an illegitimate son? Is that why they're trying to break off the engagement? His nanny rushed over and asked where he heard such a thing. She told him not to think that way, his father loved him very much. Do you think I can convince Lady Barnian to change her mind? He asked. She smiled and said, of course, you can. The little boy brightened up. Then I'll go get a present for Lady Barnian. Since everyone likes presents, she won't reject me, right? His nanny smiled. That's a great idea. Let's do that. At the market, Ibelia was walking quietly when she suddenly heard a familiar voice. Turning around, she saw Lucius running, with his nanny chasing after him, but he wasn't looking and tripped, falling to the ground. When she heard people whispering about a child getting hurt, she couldn't stop herself. Even though she didn't want to get involved, she was too kind to walk away. She rushed back to where the little boy lay and asked, are you all right? Lucius didn't expect to see her. She gently told him to get up before he caught a cold. But he replied, I can't. I came to get a gift for you. A gift for me? But your health comes first, she said. He smiled. Then, would you join me? I'd really love it if you joined us for tea today. Seeing how cute and sincere he was, she couldn't refuse this time. So she followed them back to the manor for tea, even though she knew she didn't really have the time. Lucius happily served her, and she couldn't stop smiling. She asked why he had wanted to have tea with her so badly. He hesitated before answering, I wanted to ask if you would be my stepmother. Ibelia was speechless. How was she supposed to tell this child she couldn't be his stepmother? My lord. I don't think I can be your stepmother, she said sadly. He looked at her and asked, is it because I'm an illegitimate child? But she shook her head. That's not it. Just then, the door opened. It was Duke Adelhart. He asked coldly, "What brought you here?" Lucius looked startled, and Ibelia wondered why. "Why are you alone with Lucius?" the Duke asked sharply. She thought to herself, the reason the Duke agreed to marry me in the first place is because no one knows he's not Lucius' father, and the Viscount knows that. But why do they look so much alike? Isn't it crazy? Stay tuned for the next upload. Thank you.